has been a minute since I've made a video not strictly related to computers or Linux or the internet or something like that, and I had an idea for a video I thought was worth making, and then it occurred to me it is actually tangentially applicable to Linux as well. But I was thinking a little bit about how prone I can be to giving up when learning something. I'll hit this point of doubt, this moment of indecision, and then I just give up completely. Or it turns into, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow, oh, I'll do it the next day, and that's just giving up in a sense too. And, I was thinking through, after noticing that I've done this a fair amount with, different things that I've tried to learn, I was thinking about, why do I do this? What is the reason that I give up at this sort of thing instead of just pushing through and trying to get through it? Because professionally, I don't do this, right? If I have something that I know I need to get done, there's this external pressure for me to do it, I get it done. There's no point of doubt. There's no moment of indecision. There's no thinking about giving up with it. Whereas anything that I'm, trying to learn for the intrinsic value of learning it, I have this point where I'm thinking, I can't do this. I can't manage to do this. And I think learning overall is a logarithmic curve, right? It's not linear. It's not like you're going to continue making the same amount of progress the entire time you're learning a skill, right? It's going to start very quickly. You can make a lot of progress the first, few weeks and months you're learning it. And then it starts to get slower and slower, and you slog on, and you get past the honeymoon phase of it being a new and interesting topic. And you have to push past that, because after it's this logarithmic curve, you eventually hit this golden point where it becomes linear again, in my experience. The one thing that I've spent the longest amount of time learning is violin, and I definitely feel like, after it became this sort of slower logarithmic end of the curve, it got to this golden point where it became linear again, because you hit this point of understanding everything you don't know. You hit this point of being able to say, okay, I see what's wrong here. I see what I need to work on. Whereas what's really hard in that sort of flatter part of the logarithmic curve is not understanding what's wrong. You're trying to learn something, but you don't understand what you need to be doing to learn it. And I think regardless, when you're learning a literal skill, it's always going to be easier to learn than trying to work on something creative where you have almost no direction whatsoever. At least in my own experience, since I personally am somebody who really struggles creatively, which is funny considering a lot of the things I do are kind of creative things, but I always feel like I have to work very hard to manage to be creative with things and to have, that spark of inspiration. And maybe I'm just saying that since, I'm around a lot of creative people. I know a lot of people who are very creative, and they sort of have this just aura about them where they're always just having ideas for how to do things, and they're just creative, and it's cool to see that, I'm not saying this from like a jealous place, but I just personally don't feel like I have that creativity. To make something, I feel like I have to work at it very hard, and it's not something where I just have this spark of inspiration. So my sort of solutions here for the idea of giving up before I've hit that golden point when learning things, as well as, giving up when I'm trying to do something creatively. So first of all, I like to now try to accept early on that I could fail at something. Because when thinking through, why is it that I want to give up at this? It's so that I can avoid later on having to deal with the repercussions of failing and, disappointing myself when it comes to learning something. I don't want to have to deal with that disappointment, so I just say I'm going to give up early on so I don't have to face it, right? Whereas if I say, starting out, there is a real chance I could fail at this, it sort of prevents me from worrying about disappointing myself, because I know early on this might not work out, but that's okay. I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to try my best. It's not like I'm going to lose anything by just trying, even if it doesn't work out. I mean, sure, yes, I'm, losing the time I put in, but other than that, it's not like I'm going to lose anything, so I'm just going to try my best. Doesn't matter if I fail. And sort of saying that early on has been very freeing in terms of being able to work on something without, hitting this point of thinking about, I can't do this, I'm just going to give up with it. Something else, a more physical solution I've tried to do when working on something creatively, I've given myself a time limit if I hit that roadblock, right? If I'm working on, for example, a track of electronic music, and sometimes I'll start out and I'll have this really good idea for like a bass line or a really good idea for a melody, and I get it down, and then I have no idea where to go. And I can, reference things and say, all right, this is what a tentative structure for this track could be, or something like that. And, I can look at something and say, all right, this is the correct way to do this in quotes like that. But that's not really being creative with it. That's not, having that spark of, I know what direction to take this track in. And it's not like I've never had a spark of creativity. Sometimes I will have that fleeting moment of, oh my gosh, I know exactly what to do here. But, it's not common for me to have that. So I'm usually like really trying very hard to get that creative moment, right? Anyway, so I'll just give myself a certain amount of time. If I feel like I'm ready to just give up on this track and just go start a new track, I will say I have 3 hours to work on this, and if I can't have any sort of inspiration in 3 hours, then I'll give up. Or maybe I'll go back to it in a week and give it, a couple hours in a week, and if I really can't do it then I'll give up. And that works for a couple reasons. The first one being it sort of gets me past that initial I can't do this feeling, because it's just like, all right, I'm just going to do this. It doesn't matter, whatever. I'm just going to do it for another couple hours, then I'm done. And so it's that freeing sense, first of all. And then second of all, I always find that I can be a lot more creative if I'm really bored. If I'm saying I'm going to sit here and do this for 3 hours, I can't do anything else. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to go read a book. I'm not going to go outside. I'm just going to sit here and do this. Then I get really bored and I actually have ideas, which maybe that's the solution creatively in some sense, just be bored enough that you can have ideas, but that's the solution I've found. But anyways, the way that I've thought, this kind of relates to Linux in a sense too, is that I've seen multiple times now people who are considering switching to Linux and they get started with it, and on their first install of their first distro, something goes wrong slightly in some way, like maybe they don't immediately have Wi-Fi. And a lot of the time it'll be this really simple sort of thing that's like, okay, if they took 5 minutes, they would be able to fix this. And I'm actually thinking of a case in which a friend of mine was actually asking me for Linux help with something because he wanted to go to Linux and he was trying to install it and like something went wrong and he was asking me about it. And I was like, oh, it's probably that, just do this real quick. And by the time he, heard about that and was just like thinking about, all right, maybe I should do this, he had, I don't know, just decided to go back to Windows or something. I don't even know what happened there, but it's like, it was the simplest thing. And he was gonna go to Linux and then he was like, no. So that's the sort of thing where it's like, all right, come on, if you just push past that, you would have been able to get to it and enjoy Linux, and maybe not quite this golden point of being able to use it, but you would have had a usable system and it would have been, very likely a 5-minute fix with it. So, that was one thing I was thinking of. And then I was thinking of, well, that particular situation doesn't apply to me, but something that does apply to me is a lot of the time as I've mentioned before, I like to go through programs and try to change stuff sometimes. If I have, something that I wish a program was behaving a different way, I will go through and, try to change stuff about it. And since I don't really properly know many languages, if any properly, I often will, start doing something and get somewhere and then get to a point of I can't figure out how to do this. And sometimes I'll be able to push past that, but other times, let's just say I have a lot of programs just like abandoned, halfway edited, sitting in my source folder, to be honest. So, I try to push past that, and I guess the solution is just continuing to persevere and maybe, I don't know, in that case, reading the documentation a bit more and going back to it with a fresh set of eyes at some point. But anyways, I was just thinking this kind of applies no matter what area you're learning things in. I guess this is just one of those somewhat universal human topics, since I do like to talk about topics that I think, it's cathartic for me to talk about it in some sense, and it's also the sort of thing where hopefully somebody else is going to get something out of hearing this and maybe either realize something or have an idea for how to solve something in their own life, whatever. Anyways, that's about it. I'll see you next time. Peace.